Hi, this is Manish Vijay from PM Pulse, bringing to you yet another power-packed episode of PM Ninja video series. This particular video has been made in a matter of urgency. There's more emergency to it, so please pardon my absolutely hurried or rushed kind of a video. I want this video to reach out to as many people as possible because the examination pattern has changed. Now, if this particular video surprises you that even though it's not January 2021, yet the examination pattern has changed, please watch my earlier video, which actually talks about the surprise and the warning that I issued to people and the areas that you need to focus on. In this particular video, I'm actually going to focus on how to answer some of those questions. I'm trying to make an attempt to reach out to as many people as possible to let them know how to answer these kind of questions, the new pattern questions which are showing up in PMP exams, right? So here's my attempt to make sure that you sail through even these difficult times. And I'm not talking about coronavirus. I'm talking about the sudden change, uninformed change by PMI in the examination till December end, and they just started last Monday. Not very happy about it, so keep watching. All right, you know what I'm going to do is I am actually going to show you some important tips and tricks to arm you about how to answer questions. What I've heard from people is they are finding it very difficult to answer questions because many of the options look extremely similar. They're asking a lot of questions about virtual meetings, about the rules that you should be following in a virtual and a cross-cultural kind of a setup. They're asking quite difficult questions in interpersonal skills and stuff like that. So I'm going to tell you that though I'm not too sure which are the different areas they're going to actually ask questions on, because they are literally becoming Wild West in terms of asking questions. And I know a lot of people have suffered. It's not a good thing, but the fact is it's there. It is happening. So instead of only cribbing about why are these PMI guys doing like this, we can do something about it. And one of that is arm ourselves better. Here's my attempt to help you. I'm actually going to take multiple jabs at this. The very first thing I'm going to talk about is meetings, right? So when we talk about meetings, whether it is a virtual meeting, whether it is a traditional meeting, there are certain rules. If you just follow them without compromise, you will actually end up answering these so-called difficult questions. When it comes to meetings, the most important rule is no agenda, no meeting. Basically, when you do not have an agenda, do not go for the meeting. There are a lot of questions which will actually give you all kinds of scenario that the agenda was not ready, or there were a lot of mistakes in the agenda has not been circulated prior to the meeting. No matter how much is the urgency of that particular meeting, if it's not ad hoc, if the word is ad hoc in the question, then of course ad hoc simply means without an agenda. So barring that, every other meeting is a planned meeting. And one of the elements of planning of a meeting is what are we going to discuss over there? And that is called agenda, right? So understand the difference between an urgent meeting, which is still planned, so you need an agenda even for an urgent meeting. But an ad hoc meeting is something that you just meet without an agenda for a very short duration of time, only taking up one particular item, and that item is discussed there and then, right? So understand this difference. With this basic understanding, always understand one point, and that is whenever in the exam they talk about the agenda is not ready and they are not talking about an ad hoc meeting, no meeting, postpone it, right? So go for a option, even though they sound similar, go for an option which actually postpones it. All right, so that takes care of the very first item. Second is stick to the agenda. Nowadays, you're getting a lot of questions which people are talking about is one of the person suddenly gets up during a virtual meeting or a face-to-face meeting that we should know all the roles and responsibilities of all the people who are attending this particular meeting. Now, if you see that's not part of your agenda, you need to choose an option as a project manager or as an agile leader, or basically Scrum leader, whatever. Doesn't really matter. If you are actually the facilitator for that meeting, your job is to ensure that these guys actually follow the agenda. Everybody sticks to the agenda. Your job is to ensure that everybody sticks to the agenda. What you should also do is choose an option which talks about telling the person politely or even directly that that's not part of the agenda, we may take it up later, or you make it part of a separate agenda. I mean, of course, that will depend on the kind of options that you've got, but choose something which is politically correct and also, making you stick to the agenda. That's politely, discourage the participant to ask questions which are outside of agenda, right? So keep that in mind, stick to the agenda. Now, that whether this is a virtual meeting or whether it is a face-to-face meeting. And the third is, you see, nowadays the PMP examination is suddenly focusing a lot on cross-cultural. Of course, even earlier they used to focus a lot on cross-culture, but the number of questions that they're asking now, mixing with meetings, communications and everything, it's actually become pretty large. So they also talk a lot about cross-culture. Now, whenever you are in a meeting, please make sure, the third point is, do not use jargons or speech patterns local to a specific culture, right? Do not use those kind of jargons or colloquial language which is only understood or more understood by a specific group of people or belonging to a specific culture, because the others would not be able to understand it. Goes without saying that even if there is one person who speaks a specific language, all of us will speak a common language. So for example, 80 of us, they speak a particular language like Chinese or Japanese. It's not that all of us will discuss only in Chinese. Why? Because there's one person who only speaks English. So we need to make sure that, we are speaking in a common language, right? And that's very important, right? So always remember that over and above these points, these meeting points, you will always be following the sender-receiver model. So you look at a question and then figure out, are they really talking about a meeting question? Or are they talking about a communication question where they are actually just showing as a background of a meeting? So if they are talking about a communication question, it'll be something that, how do you ensure that everybody has understood exactly what you are saying, even though it's a part of the meeting? So that's why I actually drew a circle around it and basically said that all of these patterns, all of these rules that I've given you for meeting, always make sure that they are done in the overall envelope of sender-receiver model. That means even if you have communication questions coming up, which are in the guise of a meeting, you would know that you have to ensure that everybody has understood the way you wanted them to understand. Perfect. So that's what takes care of meetings. All right, so now let's talk about some more points. And this time we're going to talk about cultural diversity. The number of questions on cultural diversity and cultural FOXPA is quite a few. So let's have some rules in place to ensure that we are able to answer questions when it comes to cultural diversity, right? So one of the things that you need to keep in mind is the best method of communication. Now, whether they're talking about communication, whether they are talking about meetings, whatever they're talking about, the best way to get across and put all the cross-cultural teams at the same platform or reduce the number of confusions or misunderstandings, the best is formal written. That's the best, right? Because then when it is formal, instead of informal verbal or informal written, you actually get rid of any of the colloquial language or jargon that you are more used to or specific to a culture. So you use a very sterile language which is only meant for people to understand, and that is called formal written, which is the best. Formal verbal is also okay, but the best results are formal written. Perfect. So that means even after a virtual meeting where you have multiple cultures coming in, people from different cultures, you need to make sure that you actually follow up with written messages, written information about who does what. So a formal written, what I call communication has to be made for whatever that has been discussed or agreed upon in after each of the virtual meetings, particularly if you have people from different cultures, right? Now, please also understand that having cross cultures, participants or team members from different cultures, they do create misunderstandings, but then also remember that they also have a lot of positivity. For example, if you have two questions, if you have a question where you have what I call two options which sound very similar, now, about reducing chances of misunderstanding, choose the one which has a more positive intonation. For example, some of the benefits of a cross-cultural kind of a team is that it helps to solve problems which are usually not possible when you have only a specific kind of a mindset or a culture looking at it. So it creates an opportunity for us to actually solve more problems because different cultures kind of look at it differently. Their approach itself actually helps solve more problems. So you can actually share ideas and you'll be all the more richer. And it's even beneficial for projects. So don't only look at that as a cross-cultural thing. Oh man, we have to be always careful about misunderstanding and things like that. You also have to go for a more positive kind of a approach. So keep that in mind as well. This is to help you overcome those kind of situations where you have more than one options which look so similar that you're finding it difficult to select. So that's one of the tiebreakers that you could use. When we talk about point number 3, we talk about diversity training. You'll get a lot of questions about diversity. Like as a project manager, you are worried that when people from different cultures come together, there might be some misunderstanding, there might be some cultural insensitivity, even though not intended. What is the best thing that you can do? Well, you would also get options like, build up as a team, do some team building exercises, which is cool. But if one of the options is talking about diversity training or, sensitization, right? Cultural training, diversity training, or cultural sensitization, go for that option. Because one of the best ways to ensure that different cultures work together and understand each other better without actually creating cultural faux pas or treading each other's toes is to have a diversity training. If you know about somebody or certain cultures, you'll not find it funny, or you'll not be shocked, or how would I say, you'll have a lot more acceptance, right? So that's the keywords in a PMI. Make sure, right? However, if in the questions they talk about that you're worried about the fact that there might be a lot of misunderstanding among team members who are from different cultures, but they don't talk about diversity or sensitization, that's not one of the options, then go for team building exercise, because then it is assumed that, it is part of the team building exercise as sensitization. But in case you don't even have diversity training or what I call a team building exercise, then go for ground rules. Always remember, one of the things that you need to follow is ground rules. Ground rules is a part of team charter. Team charter is an output of the process called planned resource management. That as a team member, what is it that you're going to use to make sure that all the team members work together? So one of the ways to actually reduce all these cultural issues and misunderstandings is to follow ground rules. You can actually bring about a lot of cultural sensitivity using ground rules, right? Okay. And then we talk about penalization. In extreme cases, when the question is talking about that a person has purposefully, right? You have to be very careful about the question. If the question is actually talking about that the person knowingly insulted somebody, made a sexist remark, made a religion-based remark, right? Negative kind of a remark, or remarks, regarding a different culture, but knowingly, right? You have to be careful about the way the question has been written. If they're actually talking about that a person has done it knowingly, then there is no diversity training after that. right? Then it's a case of penalization, because you should have a zero acceptance policy when somebody does these kind of things knowingly, because that is fascism, that is a part of racism, that is a part of, bias, which you cannot allow in your team. So understand that at times, in very few questions, you might even have to go for penalization or giving a stern warning, reporting him to the HR manager or something like that, when the question is very clear that the person did it knowingly, right? Or the diversity training was done and yet you found instances of one particular person doing this a lot, right? So make sure that's penalization. But make sure that you're not using penalization as a very general rule. That's only done in those kind of questions where it's pretty obvious that the person has done it knowingly. All right, so now we are going to talk about the virtual meetings, some specific points about virtual meetings. A lot of questions are showing up in PMP exams connected to virtual meeting. So what do we focus on? All right, one, follow up in writing. So after every kind of a meeting, always follow up in writing. Remember what we talked about in the beginning, formal, right, written is the best to cut across culture. So whenever you have a virtual meeting, because people are joining in from different geographies, you have to assume that you are in a cross-cultural setup. Simple as that, okay? Don't wait for the question to say so, just assume it to be so whenever you're talking about virtual meeting. 2, reduce dependency on verbal. As I said, it actually ties in very well with what we just discussed before, that, try to avoid or, reduce the instances where you are, relying too much on verbal. Because verbal is fine, you should use it, but reduce it, try to make it as formal as possible. But at the same time, when you reduce the dependency on that, the colloquial misunderstanding would actually reduce because of the language that you might be using. So it's not, remember, the word is reduce, right? Don't go for anything like suppress or remove, right? Whenever among the options provided in PMP exams, when they particularly talk about cross cultures or they talk about virtual meetings, do not choose options which talk about suppress or remove, right? In the sentence that they have written like suppress the chances of misunderstanding or remove any instances of verbal, that's not the correct answer, right? So as a project manager, we never take a very hardcore kind of a stance. It's not done, because what if you do not have all possible means of, communication technology? So it's not that you will remove any kind of a verbal discussion, you'll reduce it. All right. And the fourth one, always remember that whenever we are talking about communication, whenever we are talking about anything, meetings or virtual meetings, remember the 7%, 38% and 55%. What are these percentages? Well, always remember that when it comes to talking, when it comes to discussions, the words coming out of your mouth, they just constitute for 7%, right? 38% is the tonality. Tonality, there's another word for it. It is called paralingual. And 55% is your expressions, your body language, your stance, the way you stand and talk, whatever it is. So remember, when you are reading questions and when you're going through options, right, keep these things in mind. And as an overall, remember what I call, this is what happens when you try to make a rushed up meeting, you kind of miss certain words. The major constituents of communication, so 7%, 38% and 55%. Keep this in mind. All right, so now as a last part of this particular video, which is rather hurriedly made, and I apologize for the rawness of this, because I just want to get it out there as soon as possible, because every minute that I waste on, kind of editing or anything, people are facing problems in PMP exams. So please go ahead and share this video as much as you can. This is just an attempt for you, for others to handle the new pattern which suddenly has been imposed by PMI on all of us, even though it's still December. And a lot of people have exams lined up. So please go through this. It's going to help you a lot. Now, we are talking about overall tricky questions. Now, what are those tricky questions? Tricky questions are those questions where you will find options which are very similar, and you will kind of do a double take or a triple take to go through the questions again and again and eventually waste your time trying to figure out what the hell is he trying to tell us, which is the correct option. All of these options kind of, look exactly the same, right? So how do we take care of that situation? Because people have told me that they ended up wasting a lot of time, and I don't want you guys to face the same situation. Now, these are standard rules, amazing rules. Stick to them and you will actually do exceptionally well. Tricky questions. The very first one is never select an answer, right? That's usually gut based, or it is based on a lot of assumptions that you might have ended up taking. Now, whenever you have all these kind of questions which are interpersonal kind of questions connected to conflict handling, leadership, or something to do with handling cross-culture, team or something like that. And on top of that, they give you a tricky question with multiple options sounding or looking very similar. You will actually, if you go for selection, you will actually end up choosing the one which you might have thought as an assumption. Like, for example, whenever you read a question, sometimes you might think of a similar situation that may have happened in your real world project. And if you end up choosing, there's no guarantee that is the right answer, because who knew that you actually used all the, PMP related concepts in your actual world project. So don't do that. Don't take assumptions. Don't think behind the, question. Just stick to the question. Just the face value, right? And you have to choose from within the options. So my suggestion is, whenever you see a tricky questions, don't choose, don't select an answer, eliminate, try to figure out which of these will not fit in absolutely, right? Hardcore answers or answers which are using suppress, remove, or those kind of things. Like, get rid of those kind of questions which are politically absolutely incorrect, which are not practically feasible, right? Remove them, right? When you do that, chances are you'll get to the right option which you are not able to remove. That's your answer. But what if you get, you're able to remove just two, and you still have two options which are very similar? What do you do then? That's the time when you look at whether the question, the body of the question before the option started, did they end with next? Did they end with first? Did they end with best? Now, next and first, well, that depends on your process, how you look at it, which process are they talking about. Keeping that in mind, your next and first are relatively easier to answer. What is more difficult is when they use the word best. What is the most important thing for you to do? So they're not talking about first or next. They're talking about the best or the most important thing. In that scenario, always go for a larger option, a more positive option. So for example, when you see two options which are very similar to each other, go for an option which is actually so large, which is encompassing the other option as well and doing a few other things, right? So larger, more positive, or more politically correct, like goody thing, right? And option, right? So go for those kind of options which are larger, which are all encompassing, which are politically more correct, or shows a little bit of a positivity. Go for those options, right? That will give you a very high probability of getting it right. Right? So there are so many notes that I shared with you. This was done in a hurry, but the value is not lacking. What may be lacking is the quality of this video, but the value of what I'm telling you is not lacking. It's really going to help you in the exams. Remember, the PMP has changed its patterns. It is looking more similar to the pattern that they should be coming out, from 2nd January, but they have started doing it right now. A lot of people are upset, but we cannot live a life just being upset. This has happened. What do we do with it? That is more important. So though I don't have an exact material which I can throw away and and give it to you in just less than a week now, but the next best thing I could do is give you some notes to ponder, and these notes going to help you, right? So go through this video multiple times and make use of it. This is Manish Vijay from PM Pulse, and I'm bringing to you yet another episode from PM Ninja video series, albeit a little bit in a hurry. It's all for your benefit. Share it as much as you can. The more people, preparing for PMP exam, they see it, the better it is. Share it on your forums. It's very important that as many people go through it before attempting the PMP exams, right? Before the end of December, right? This is not really applicable after December. From January, I'll have a completely new set for the new version of PMP exams. Thank you for watching, and best of luck for your PMP exams. You really need it.